Welcome to NFL World, where NFL starts and ends. I'm your host, Jacob, and welcome to Deep Dive, where each episode we go into a different division. We talk about the good, the bad, and the downright ugly of every team. Let's begin with the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions, as we do the NFC East this week. The Super Bowl champions, the great thing about the Eagles was, this was a team that was already built. They tried to go for a Super Bowl a couple years ago. It didn't exactly work because of coaching errors and just a young team all around. But then they ended up going and getting Saquon Barkley this offseason. It really balanced them out as a team. They asked Jalen Hurts to only throw the ball 20 times instead of asking him to throw the ball 30 times. Asking him to throw 20 times, he's way more successful. They asked him to run a little less, but still on the scramble stuff. They let him be more relaxed in the pocket, more play action stuff. They had a great defense that was showing amazing improvement behind Vic Fangio. Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator in a Super Bowl because he did those things. And like I said, the team was already built. They had some pieces that they brought in that would help out Fangio and Moore. But those are things that you always are going to do. And they won a Super Bowl by doing so. It worked very well. Now, again, when you go try to get to a Super Bowl, you have to be very lucky. Like, it's not just skill, it's all about luck and timing and everything like that. And they got very lucky, and they had a lot of skill, and that's all what really matters. Talking about, when we talk about teams like the Eagles, what made them so good was the fact of, we said here on this show, the Chiefs have to stop Saquon Barkley. If they don't, they will lose. What did the Chiefs do in the Super Bowl? They stopped Saquon Barkley. What happened? They still lost. They could not keep up with the Eagles' offensive attack because they couldn't rely on anyone to just stop Saquon Barkley the way they would normally stop a running back. They had to devote more people to that task. That's what was going on, which is crazy to think about, but that's what was going on over here. So in listening to some of the people said, oh, well, I don't know about this Eagles team. Like, they have Saquon. The offense is really good. If I had any concern, it would be their defense. They lost some key players. But other than that, this team's going to be good for a while if they can continue doing what they've been doing. The only biggest concern I have with them in a coaching light is this is the, I think, fourth offense coordinator they're going to have that actually hold that position, but fifth play caller. It's ridiculous. It's nuts. It really is. It's like Sirianni called the plays, then it went to Steichen, then it went to Johnson, who was the quarterback coach, now to Moore. Now it's, I don't even know off the top of my head. It's just continuing. So you're hoping they can figure that out for Ghost can stay for a while, but we'll see what happens there. Moving on to the Commanders. This team was unexpectedly good. And I completely give this credit to Dan Quinn. His ability to create a culture around a young quarterback, a young offense, and a defense that was relentless was impressive. They brought in Jaden Daniels. They draft Jaden Daniels. That's a hard thing to do, to make him day one start. And he looked comfortable, and everyone looked comfortable around him. The run game was pretty good. They brought in Austin Eckler. I mean, he got hurt, and he didn't really play that much afterwards. The offensive line got significantly improved. The defense, they brought in some good rotational players in Armstrong and Fowler. They brought in Bobby Wagner. Obviously, most of these guys I'm talking about already had a pedigree and already played for Dan Quinn. But there was a couple that didn't. Jeremy Chin was a great player for them. And it again, benefited so much. And they surprised people. They got into the playoffs. They knocked off the Buccaneers. They knocked off the Detroit Lions. And I really think if they had played a better game with less turnovers, they could have beaten Philadelphia and been in the Super Bowl. It was the first time this team had made the NFC Championship game since 1991. It's the second. It was now the streak was gone, but at the time, the longest streak a team had never made an NFC Championship game. Now that is no longer the case, as we will talk about another team that is the case for. The Commanders, I don't know how far they will fall this year. But if Dan Quinn is the coach that we all think he is, they won't fall that far. They may fall a little bit. Maybe they don't make the playoffs. Maybe they just miss it. But they will play very well, and they'll play hard. And I think that's what Dan Quinn's teams do. They play well, they play hard, they play physical, and they play fast. Which physical and playing hard are not the same thing. They just do things very well. They're very sound. There's a couple games thinking, okay, more relaxed than he is. But other than that, he should be okay moving forward. But the biggest concern I have two big concerns. One's an offensive concern, one's a defensive concern. The offensive concern is Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator. They ran those underneath screens so often. Wonder if they have anything else. They brought in Deebo Samuel, that was a big get. But I wonder if they have anything else. Because I don't know if they do. I don't know. Do they? Do they have anything else? I don't know. Because they ran those plays so often. That's my concern offensively. Because the team's going to react to that and say, okay, it's going to be here in this spot. Like, you have to either expect it or be aware of it. Be aware of it because they could do it in this situation. And so make sure you tackle everything like that. Defensively, look, it's always been the concern of Dan Quinn, but it's happened for the last 4 years, I can say for certain, which is a Dan Quinn-led team has had issues, or Dan Quinn defense has had issues, I should say, in stopping the run. It happened in Dallas. It's happening here. They don't stop the run very well. And teams that can beat them are going to run the football because it's a pass-happy defense. They want you to pass the ball. They won't pass the ball unless they won't pass the ball a lot if they can run the football. You have to force them to run and stop them. and they haven't been able to do that. So there's that concern. But other than that, they were pretty good. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the negatives for this Commanders team. It was that good. So in both cases, very little to say about either team, both Eagles and Commanders. Very impressed with them. Now, moving on to the last two teams, there is going to be a lot of concerns and a lot of issues and things we have to address. Let's begin with the Cowboys, who this year, be honest, I'm surprised they won 7 games this year. That they won 7 games. It was such a shocker. Hang on a second. It was such a shocker that they won 7 games. Because I'm looking at them, I'm like, how on earth did they win 7 games? They were bad. But then you go look at it and you say, okay, Giants twice. They beat the Commanders once. They beat the Browns. They beat the Steelers. So I've just accounted for 5. They beat Carolina, that's 6. And what's the 7th one? What's the 7th one? I'm trying to make sure I got this right. Oh, they beat the Buccaneers. That's the 7th team. Not in order, but they've won 7 games. That's how they won. And every game, they really struggled. Carolina Panthers were the game that they won big, and it's like, okay, that's not that impressive. In talking to a couple Cowboys fans and how they felt, the decision of how the season went, they were like, yeah, get rid of McCarthy. Bring in a different coach because this doesn't work. The defense was better as the season got along, but didn't start off well. There was a lot of injuries because you guys didn't go and pet anyone for depth pieces. You decided to only sign defensive tackles in August, which there was 35, 34, 33-year-old guys in that at that time. It didn't work. You're having them play valuable minutes in their mid-30s. Doesn't work that way. You didn't have a second receiver outside. You didn't have a third receiver or a second receiver. You had injuries. You didn't really have a ground game. Again, for 5 consecutive years, you've not had a ground game. You put too much pressure on your quarterback, and then your quarterback goes down with an injury. Now what are you going to do? Your offensive line's a mess. There was so much going on that you basically just said, we have to scrap the whole thing. We have money, let's scrap the whole thing. So they brought in a coach. They brought in a whole new coaching staff. I say that because they just hired Schottenheimer and said, yeah, okay. But they brought in Eberflus to be the defensive coordinator. They brought in a couple other players. They built a good staff. If it can just mesh well together, we'll have to wait and see. They have made some good moves, but you have to be way better. And I'm still looking for, in my opinion, and I said this here and privately, what Dallas needs to do, because they have too many holes to fill, they have to go and fill. Hold on a second. They have to go and fill a but before they can do that, they gotta fill a free agency. And by doing that, so I'm talking like you draft at a position you've already signed a player at to create depth. And by doing that, that allows you to create depth naturally, but allows you to get better quickly. So it covers both bases. Because if the young guy is already better, then you can say, okay, good, here he is. But if you say, okay, no, this older guy's better, but this young guy, he's got something to him. He can be a backup for a year or two or however long he needs to be. And then when we throw him out there, we've had a good enough team and we can do the same thing. We can draft, sign, whatever. That's what Dallas should do. There's a couple positions they're going to do that. But there's a couple positions they definitely need to continue to do that by signing a free agent and drafting behind. Because this team right now has no depth. You can't bet on young players to always be the reason you win. You can't bet on your quarterback always being the reason that you win. You can't bet on other teams failing the reason that you win. You have to be better than that. I do like some of the moves they've made. But I was texting with my brother last night. I was texting with Lucas, and I had gotten the news that Stephon Diggs signed with the Patriots. So I texted him and I said, look, you guys got Stephon Diggs. That's a big move for you guys. It was a lot of money. They signed him for 3 years, $69 million, which is $23 million a year. It's a lot, especially at this time of the year. It's a lot of money. But they need a number one. If they get to draft somebody, we'll see what happens. It was a good move on their part. Now they're in a position to go and whoever they want to sign, they can sign. The other team, like, wanting a player like that, obviously get left out in the cold. But you can still go get a player that's still really good. As I described to Lucas, I said, Diggs is like a number one. Maybe not exactly number one, maybe more like a 1A now, but he can still a guy that you put out there and he beats the coverage and everything like that. And they need that guy because there's no one else to throw to. You gotta help, like I said, you gotta help your young quarterback out. Where in the case of a team like Dallas, they don't necessarily need to do that. They need to draft somebody or sign somebody or do both where they can get a guy open. And that's what I was talking about, like a Keenan Allen, even an Amari Cooper. They get open enough that they can make a play. And that's what you want. They're not a 1 anymore. They're maybe a strong 2. But they get open, and then you can draft the best player. And if the best player is a wide receiver, great. We sign a wide receiver, we draft a wide receiver, bang. Okay, our wide receiver room is done. It's good. And now let's go work on the other positions. And that's just an example. Maybe if you feel like you want to do that with offensive line or with other weak spots of the team, you can do that. But you have to fix this team. That's the reason you scrap the whole thing. They got to continue to do that, though. Haven't done it in a bit. See what else happens. But you take a team that was not good offensively. They couldn't run the football. The offensive line was terrible. They were making mistakes. They didn't know who was supposed to be in, who was supposed to be out. They didn't unplace. They didn't know. And they were making these mistakes in week 9, week 10. These are things that shouldn't happen. They were happening. And they were having struggles on defense outside of Michael Parsons. And when Michael went down, there was just problems. There was just problems, and it didn't work. So, I guess you could say disappointing. It's always disappointing with the Cowboys, but I would describe it more as anger-driven. If you really think about this division is sometimes it's mind-boggling at best. Because it's like, how has no one won this division twice since 2004? How has that not happened? It's a good question. I can't give you an answer because I don't know exactly how it's happened either. It's mind-numbing in cases. It really is. And finally, the New York Giants. Again, at the bottom of this division. They were not a good team this year. You cut Daniel Jones mid-season. You said you're going to roll with Tommy DeVito, Andrew Luck. That failed badly. After losing Saquon, you didn't have a ground game at all. Your offensive line was a mess. After the Andrew Thomas injury, it was a mess. Your defensive line wasn't as good. I mean, it has names. That's good. But it was not as improved as everyone thought it was going to be. They still struggled taking the ball away. They still made a lot of mistakes. They didn't win many games because of that. They just had so many problems. It's just like, I understand the injury bug was around. Don't get me wrong. Everyone understands that. But sometimes you look at this and you're like, how on earth did this happen? I don't know how this happened. I don't know how to explain what just happened. I am completely mind-boggled. I don't know how else to explain it. How do you explain what happened to the Giants? Because they, again, no ground game. They depend too much on your quarterback. Your quarterback wasn't as good to the point that you are in the top 5 picking this year, in which you have to get better. And we don't know what they're going to do. Because there is a lot of things they need help with. This is not as simple as saying, okay, there's a lot of good pieces and we need to draft one player. This is no, we got several holes and whoever we draft is going to have to help immensely. I don't know who it's going to be. They kept Dable. Alright, whatever. It just didn't make, there was a lot of things that didn't make sense from the Giants. That's all. And I said this at the time, and I still believe this. The Giants are doing what the Bears have been doing. Where the Bears keep the same GM. They hire a coach. There's already a quarterback that's been there from the previous regime. They go 2 years. The coach doesn't like the quarterback. He gets rid of the guy. The guy's already been there for 2 or 3 years. He gets cut. They draft another guy. And then by that Thanksgiving or Christmas, that head coach of the Bears is fired. And yet they keep doing it. They just hire another coach with the same quarterback of the previous regime. It doesn't work that way. Why don't they choose to draft a quarterback when they have a new coach? Why do they do this? It didn't work. Now, Ben Johnson might be the exception to that rule in Chicago. But in the Giants' case, they're doing the same thing. Dable hasn't shown that he's been a good enough coach for this team. They won. He was coach of the year. Congrats. I'll do this example. Jason Garrett won coach of the year twice in 4 years. Didn't mean he was good enough coach for the job. He just got very lucky with the pieces he had. Brian Dable's kind of in the same boat. He was brought in as this offensive mastermind. I don't know why I'm so itchy here. He was this offensive mastermind, and somehow, some way, he was able to convince the Giants that without Saquon Barkley, they'd be okay on offense. Even though they've shown they're not even okay with him, that they'll somehow be okay without him. I don't know how they expected that. There's a lot of problems, not just offensively, but defensively. You can blame Daniel Jones all you want, and he deserves a lot of the blame. But there's a lot of blame to go around, and it does start with the head coach, the general manager, and the owner, all in that building. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Hubert. Out.